Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with each of you and our distinguished guests and members of the consortium. Today, I stand here incredibly humbled and honored to be alongside a group of truly dedicated leaders to announce a matter critical to all of Maryland's 900,000 school children: the need for access to behavioral health services in our K-12 institutions. We all understand that children are our future, but to have a brighter future, we must recognize that at no time in recent memory have young people been under more stress and strain than today. Social media influences and the pandemic's effects on learning and socialization have had a major impact on our children. I think I speak for every single person that's up here when I say that our paramount concerns are our young Marylanders' mental well-being and overall success. The people up here know firsthand the pressures and challenges faced by our youth and how these pressures have become increasingly complex. That's why I am thrilled today to help announce a historic investment in Maryland school-aged children, $120 million in grant funding for behavioral health services over the next year and a half. And what's important to note is that we're not doing the same old thing of putting money in the same processes. We are approaching this in a different way. Through Maryland's Blueprint, we are bringing new and different services that we know are evidence-based and backed to help young people be more successful, and that is the beauty of what this consortium has put together. As many of you all know, I used to serve in Baltimore City Public Schools and was a high school teacher for 9th, 10th, and 11th graders. And what was clear is that when mental health issues were hitting a child or there was something happening outside of school, it was impossible inside the classroom. And so the key here is building that foundation of strong young people, both mentally and physically, so that they can be their best selves. At the end of the day, what we know is that these services are will be readily available to students within the school environment, and we have to level the playing field and remove the barriers that prevent some students from seeking help and maximizing their potential. What we do know is that all kids are in schools. It's the place to give these services most effectively. I want to thank all the folks on this stage today as they continue to work to improve access to behavioral health services for children throughout the entire state of Maryland. And with that, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Maryland Department of Health Secretary, Dr. Laura Herrera-Scott. Secretary Herrera-Scott.
Thank you, President Ferguson, and good morning. It's an honor to join you today, and I'd like to thank President Ferguson, Speaker Jones, and all those involved in the efforts to ensure that students throughout Maryland have access to needed behavioral health services. As already mentioned, I'm Laura Herrera-Scott, Secretary of Health, and on behalf of Governor Moore and Lieutenant Governor Miller's administration, we are excited to be here as part of the efforts to leave no one behind, especially children. The administration plans to tackle long stigmatized behavioral health conditions and seeks out solutions to strengthen what we're referring to as a continuum of care, and particularly for children and youth. We envision a state where all Marylanders get real-time access to high-quality, equitable behavioral health care. The funding which has been made available through the Blueprint is essential to make that vision a reality. It serves a down payment on children and their families. Moreover, by partnering with community-based providers to deliver behavioral health services, it offers opportunities to encourage and increase protective factors and healthy behaviors that promote healthy mental, emotional, and behavioral health development among children and youth. It pushes us upstream, so instead of waiting for children and their families to enter the system in crisis, but to deliver solutions real time where we know we can prevent and address trauma and build resilience. We must continue to address health disparities, build hope, and save lives. The Blueprint serves as a critical foundation for our vision for behavioral health care. We envision a system that operates as a seamless healthcare continuum that includes prevention, primary behavioral health care, culturally competent crisis services, and addresses ongoing mental health and substance use needs that support children and help them thrive in their communities and their schools. COVID certainly highlighted shined a light on mental health and substance use disorders in crisis, and we can't let the pandemic and the unwinding waver from that commitment to improving access to quality care for children and youth. I know I can count on our partners in the General Assembly, the Community Health Resource Commission, the Maryland State Department of Education, and the Consortium on Community Supports to continue to prioritize the needs of Maryland's children and families. Thank you to everyone who helped make this investment possible, including our elected officials who authorize funding via the Blueprint. I look forward to the continued partnership between the Department, General Assembly, MSDE, and the Consortium to make sure that no Marylander, especially no Maryland child, gets left behind. And now I'd like to introduce Chair Edward Casemeyer.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Secretary. I'm Ed Casemeyer. I'm Chair of the Maryland Health Community Resources Commission. Our function is to deliver services to the medically underserved throughout Maryland. And in the since 2005, we've actually provided help to over 500,000 people. But today, I'm really here to thank people. I want to thank President Ferguson and Speaker Jones and the entire legislature for having the foresight to understand this problem and to provide the resources needed to take care of all the kids that do have some concerns. I want to thank Secretary Herrera-Scott and the superintendent for their wisdom and guidance. I want to thank the members of the consortium, 20-some people who have been meeting since last August, a year ago, and who have really taken a problem that was one that didn't have a structure in terms of solving it, and have worked to create a structure that will fill the needs that these kids have. But most of all, I want to thank Chairman Rudolph, who you'll hear from in a few minutes, who really has done an outstanding job when you think of the fact that we began to deal with a problem that had no real initial strategy or function or structure to it in terms of solving it. We had to develop a whole concept of what would we put together to take care of all these kids who we know there are thousands probably in the state of Maryland who need some kind of service. So Delegate Rudolph did an amazing job of keeping people together and on the track, and his leadership and skill in handling, as I said, a group of 25 people took a lot of skill, and I want to thank him personally for doing a great job. So now I want to introduce one of the members, Senator Hester, who was on the commission, on the consortium, did a great job, and I want to thank her for all her ideas she put forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair Casemeyer. And I'd also like to thank you, as well as the entire Community Health Resources Commission, for your oversight of the commission and your fiscal rigor and expertise that you've brought to the table. It's great to be here today. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, we knew we had a crisis brewing in mental and behavioral health. Since 2010, the suicide rate in teenage boys has doubled. And since 2010, the suicide rate for teenage girls has tripled. Suicide is now the leading cause of death among our teenagers, and this is horrible and heartbreaking. That's why today's announcement is so really, truly important. It's the state's commitment to dealing with the health of our young people. When I think back to when I was in high school, I remember a young girl who was afraid to raise her hand in English class because she had an eating disorder and she felt like she was too fat to answer the question. And those body image stressors, they're still with our young kids today. In addition to the pressure of good grades and getting into good colleges, there's even more. There's also the fear of bomb threats and mass shootings. There's the complex links between behavioral health and social media algorithms. It is a lot for our children to deal with. And yet, our kids are resilient. Mine give me hope every day when they go off to school. As parents, we don't always know what's going on inside their heads, and that's why it's so important that these resources are going to be there when our kids need them. Now, in 2020, I was part of a bipartisan team that worked on drafting, yes, a 10-page amendment to the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, which would lay the foundation for the grants we're discussing today. In addition to requiring every local school system to appoint a behavioral health services coordinator, the amendment created the Maryland Consortium of Coordinated Community Supports. And if I thought I would be saying that then, I would have shortened the name. Now, the health of our children is not a partisan issue. There were 5 of us who worked on the amendment, 2 Republicans and 3 Democrats, including on the Budget and Tax Committee, Chair Gazzoni and Senator Serafini. And we all agreed on several key points. We needed, first and foremost, to expand access to high-quality behavioral health and related services. We also needed to help our school system work with our communities, because neither the community nor the school system could do it alone. We absolutely had to maximize funding through Medicaid and other sources so that we weren't leaving money on the table. And this is something Secretary Herrera-Scott has really stepped up and into. Thank you. We were committed to scientific evidence-based solutions, and we knew we needed to accelerate state resources, ramping up to $130 million annually in 2026 and every year thereafter. That is a big investment, and it's here to stay. Now, while our goal was clear, actually accomplishing the charge was going to be complex. And over the past year, the consortium and many of the members behind me have busily been working on this framework. And I'm so grateful to the Senate President for letting me serve in this role. And I would also like to add my thanks to Delegate and now Chair Rudolph for stepping up to fill this somewhat daunting task. I'm grateful that our presiding officers tapped you for the consortium, your experience in the General Assembly, your ability to manage compromise and bring a strong policy background and your experience as a lifelong educator. Chair Rudolph, you've led our consortium skillfully in the first year, and I thank you for your leadership. Next up.
Yes.
I want to thank all the good, positive remarks so far, and it's a pleasure for me to join you this morning. I agree with the Senator. Consortium on Coordinated Community Supports is not a title that goes well in some parts of the state, but after explaining it, they understand how important it is. That the word Coordinated Community Supports really infers partnerships throughout one's county and one's school district. And that's how we're going to address the issues that we're facing today by announcing the awarding of the grants that are going to go out for people to apply for. And we encourage service providers throughout the state to be involved in working with their school system so that we can address what I consider the #1 issue facing our young people today, and that's the mental and behavioral health that they're facing in our school systems. And we're talking about K through 12. We're talking about youngsters who shouldn't have the issue with mental health or behavioral health, but it's out there. As the chairman of the consortium, and some people have questions about the word consortium in regards to whether or not it's a consortium, because there's 25 great people from throughout the state who bring in their talents together to make this all happen. We go from Western Maryland to the Eastern Shore, to Baltimore County, Howard County. We have representatives who every month we have been meeting to make this happen. And right now we have a RFP out that people can apply. And they'll understand that by working with the school system, we can hopefully address these issues that we're facing. The consortium itself is created that we have 4 standing subcommittees. Those subcommittees are framework, which basically establishes the grant process. We have data and valuation to make sure that everything we do can be supported, that it's working. We have outreach, issues that to make sure that Western Maryland, Southern Maryland, and the Eastern Shore receive notice of this grant availability in a timely fashion. And the fact that we are still involved with the first phase of the consortium's efforts. We will be meeting again today, right after this announcement, to continue our work so that we can finish this phase and award grants by, hopefully, Mark, by the end of the year, that we can put grants on and out to communities that have applied. So I look forward to continue to work with these 25 great people. I continue to really appreciate the hard work that Jen and Lorianne and Mark have provided throughout the past year to make our job a little easier. Thank you, guys. And I want to really end this by saying how much I appreciate the Senate President and Speaker of the House for their commitment to addressing this issue, not only with their leadership and their love for children, but also providing the funds necessary. It's been my pleasure to serve as the chairman, and I look forward to another great year ahead. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. As an individual who spent 35 years teaching in our school classrooms, I was incredibly honored when Speaker Jones, who had a conflict and couldn't be here today, but I was incredibly honored when she tapped me to be a person of voice for the House of Delegates and for education. And so there's a lot to unpack about behavioral health, but I'm going to come at it from an educational standpoint. We have a phrase in education called availability to learn. It has to do with a lot of things. Are kids well fed? Are they coming from a good night's sleep? But also, now what we're attacking here is behavioral health. And children have to be in a good frame of mind to come and learn well. Student success can't improve without addressing behavioral health of our students. And even before the health strains that came with COVID-19, because we passed the blueprint well before that, we knew we needed to make sure our students were in a frame of mind and available to learn. And we needed to help them with that. And that's a tremendous task for the school to do by itself. And so the $120 million that in new grant funding we're highlighting today is a first step in our efforts to expand access to high-quality mental health and wraparound services outside of the school and inside of the school for students and their families across our state. The community partnerships that we're forming and are strengthening through this process will ensure that we are connecting to, and in some cases creating, innovative and collaborative ways to improve the behavioral health of our children and by default improve their education. And I thank you very much for coming today. I'm the last speaker, so I either turn it back over to the Senate President or to David. I don't know to whom.
Let's see if there are any questions on the consortium and what's being announced today.
To anybody really, can you give some examples of how this grant funding might work, like on the ground? What types of programs or services would be provided through these grants?
So you can imagine community-based organizations that provide behavioral health services, providing those services in the school as one. You could imagine training and education that we do for teachers to do more screening in the school. That could be another. So there's a variety of ways that, in partnership with the school, that these services can be provided. And as was already mentioned, certainly looking towards evidence-based models that have been proven elsewhere is, what we're looking to deploy in the schools and in the communities.
So is it a lot of funding for counselors?
So it could be funding for counselors, it could be funding for education, for screening, it could be funding for other services that not necessarily specific to counseling. For instance, there is a screening tool called ACEs, and we know that kids that score more than 4 or more are increased risk for depression and anxiety. Using that tool and doing earlier screening and then working with those families and those children to engage in services is another example. So the RFP has been broad enough to get people to apply for the services that we think are needed in the community.
Other questions?
When does the money become available? Maybe by next year, or?
Well, the money is available now, but the grants will be coming in October 12th, I believe. The RP response is due October 12th, and it is our goal to be able to review those grants, to be able to award the first group with the second semester of this school year.
And the idea is to have $120 million for each future year too? That's ongoing?
that would be the funding issue would be down the road, but the 120 million is to fund different projects, not only this one, but also future RFPs that will go out to provide that service.
How many RFPs have you guys received?
Well, they're not due until the 12th.
So far, have you received any?
I don't think so, no, because they just went out maybe 2 weeks ago, the request for proposals, and they're right now coming up with the process. Now, understand that every proposal that comes in has to have the support of the school system. So not only do maybe a service provider, and I call service providers partners in addressing issues, that they have to have the support of the school system so that they have the same concerns to make sure that we're addressing and we're not wasting money. So that's one point. So they're doing their research now for their product that's due October 12th, 2 or 3 weeks to review them and to award them in December to go out in January.
It sounds like this is a first of its kind in some kind of way, shape, or form, maybe perhaps in its magnitude and its approach. Can you speak to that?
I would concur that the responsibilities that the Senate President and the Speaker have put together, and it's in the amended Curran report legislation, that what we have on our table, and the Senator might want to say something, but I believe the Senate and the House work together to make sure that we don't do the same old thing, that we want to address this issue in a timely fashion, but we want to do it right.
I do want to hammer home one point here on the bipartisan nature of this that was really important in the Senate. When the blueprint was moving forward, as Senator Hester definitely mentioned, there was a long negotiation because it was really important for us in the chamber to have the blueprint pass with bipartisan votes. And one of the reasons that in the Senate we had a third of the Republican caucus who voted for the blueprint was because of the addition of this particular amendment, because of the recognition that there are some really challenging things that are happening in schools because young people are facing stressors that they've never had, that we in all of human history have never had to contemplate. And we are seeing that play out. And so if we don't have the resources, we can't just put it all on teachers. We can't just put it all on principals. We need the supports that are in the community to come into the school buildings and work in partnership to really provide the level of engagement and support that kids need to be their best selves. I think that, but it was because of this amendment that we were able to eventually see the blueprint pass on a bipartisan basis. And I think it's a really important thing for the longevity and sustainability of this program. This is something that all families, it doesn't matter political party, we want our kids to be okay.
You said that you wanted this money to go away from the same old thing and go into new opportunities to improve behavioral health among kids. How are we going to ensure that that occurs with this fund?
I mean, there is the data, yeah, well, I'll let you.
We have
keep
the
going.
data and evaluation subcommittee who is designing process to address those issues, and they will be, every grant that is approved will go through that process of data analysis and evaluation to make sure it is successful. So you understand that every grant will be reviewed before it's approved, and during the process, 6 months to a year, to review to make sure it's being evaluated correctly and the data supports that program.
Will you be offering feedback for
Oh, yes.
evaluation
And just to add, in some cases, the services don't exist today, so there'll be new services. And in other cases, as Senator Ferguson pointed out in his comments, they'll be available in the school. So accessing services outside of school is problematic for many families, especially families that don't have a lot of leave and have to take time off to get their kids to different activities, including transportation issues. So this will help solve some of those conflicts that make it difficult to get the children to services, in addition to screening. So some of that screening will be happening on-site as well.
Thank you, Mr. President.
So to what extent can these funds be used, or will they be used to staff up schools with the clinicians that they need? Because most districts, I think, at least in the area that we cover, are far below the recommended ratio of 1 social worker for every 250 kids. In Baltimore City, the benchmark is 1 for every 650 kids. Most schools aren't even hitting that. There's high vacancy rates for school psychologists and speech and language pathologists. how, and, you know, obviously having these clinicians on staff increases consistency for children as well. So how will this address that problem?
You're 100% right. There aren't enough counselors and speech pathologists to go around. And so that's when we looked at the models of what other states had done, where they had tried to hire those people into the school, they had depleted the surrounding community. And so that's why this program is so new, is because we're working with the community. So the money's not actually going to the local schools. It's going to the community providers who will work with the local schools to provide their their supports and fulfill some of those roles that you described.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, everyone. Do you guys want to do it together or one at a time? I mean, whatever, so he's gotta go sign up these.